Right, and what you find if you look into the sort of economic history, as the country becomes wealthier, there's just a proportional increase in demand for government spending. This is just an incredibly consistent regularity you see across all countries in sort of modern economic history, that as general levels of wealth increase, there's increasing political demand.
I don't want to debate the history of the United States with you, but so I really want to discuss the principles. At one point, you said you don't like to look at the principles, but I actually think that it's good to look at the empirical evidence.
Yes.
And we're quibbling about this empirical evidence. You seem to think the United States became wealthy because
we're having a disagreement about the way to think about principles. Right? Like I don't think that you can accurately identify the correct principles of justice or the correct normative principles of how people ought to live together.
So how do you know
in the abstract without looking at what kinds of social systems are actually successful. So the more your sort of rationalistic ideal of a system of justice diverges from any system that actually exists, the less certainty you can have about it working the way that you think it will.
Well, I don't want to debate the history of this, but initially you said that the government should protect peaceful citizens against people that want to use force to take their money. But now it appears that you actually do believe that they should not be protected, that in fact the government should be an instrument to extract money from them in order to give money to other people, right?
I think that coercion needs to be controlled and constrained, and the reason we want a certain kind of liberal democratic constitutional government is because coercive political authority is dangerous. And you need a complicated system of checks and balances, the diffusion of powers, in order to make it so that that power is generating the goods that justify that power. You know, like, if you want to talk about the founders, it's like Madison's dilemma, right? Like, how do you create a state that's strong enough to protect people's rights, that promotes prosperity, but isn't so strong and unconstrained that it will end up crushing them?
Well, that has nothing to do with redistribution of wealth. That's protecting their rights. This is redistributing wealth is a whole different idea than protecting their rights. Protecting their rights is rendering a service that all human beings need to have their rights protected optimally.
Right. I understand that you have a theory of rights.
Yeah. Right. Okay. But you also said
I have a different theory of rights that.
What's your theory of rights?
I've got a theory of rights that's based in how I understand the best systems to work.
What is your theory of rights? Which rights do you think human beings should have?
I think they ought to have, right to the security of their property and person. They have to have a right to have strong economic freedoms and rights. They need to have rights and freedoms of political participation and voice. They need to have rights to access of certain kinds of vital goods and services that their life.
To access vital goods and services.
So
you mean, but this issue is, you want to force other people to pay for your stuff, or you're going to work and produce it yourself and pay for it yourself? That's the whole issue. You have the right to force.
So I think, and there's a choice about how you want to use rights language. I think it's useful to say that people have a right to food or a right to clothing. I don't think that implies that they're entitled to the government provision of those things. If you have a right to something, can't you demand it from the government? No, this is your theory of rights.
Yeah,
it's not a theory I share. So this is what I'm telling you. So if I have a right to clothing, what it means is that people are entitled to the system, the kind of structure that best ensures that they're going to get what they're entitled to. So,
which means forcing other people to pay for your clothes. Or you either forcing people to pay for your clothes,
what I'm telling
or you aren't.
Is that to a large extent, most people's positive rights are protected by a system of negative liberty. If I have a right to clothes, or if I have a right to food, the system that's best in providing that is just a system of free markets, private property, competition, free enterprise. It's inappropriate for the state to intervene because it doesn't do anything to, it actually interferes with the provision of these goods that people have a right to. But it's an open question when it comes to any particular good. So for, say, the provision of health care, I think people have the right to the best system of healthcare that they could have, and I think that's largely an unregulated system of like actual insurance, like deregulating markets for services. The state shouldn't be able to tell me whether or not I can
people
give you
have
stitches.
a right to things they have a right to things, shirts and housing and transportation. Those things do not grow on trees in the jungle.
But that's what justifies.
So you have to.
That's what justifies